You know cursor, right? So this is nothing but a Visual Studio wrapper on top of AI, like maybe OpenAI. So that's what they're saying. Here, my point is like, let's say people like you are using this cursor. So whenever you ask anything, it will try to do some kind of a modifications in the script. Try to explain you like why this function is used and what is the purpose of this function or method, right? So let's say you ask a query like, create this Visual Studio, like create this folder for me, create a virtual environment for me. So it will do the task for you. How it was doing, what kind of a prompts they used in the backend to implement these kind of things. Today we'll explore this. So this is one of the famous GitHub repo x1xhlol system prompts and models of AI tools. So if you go there, you will get lot of clarity like what kind of a prompts they used in the production level for making these kind of applications, right? So today we'll explore this cursor prompts. So we'll see this chart prompt, like what they given. So they clearly mention like an AI coding assistant powered by GPT-4o. So they are in the backend they're using GPT-4o model. You operate in cursor and you're paid programming with the user to solve the coding task. They clearly mention the role, and after that they clearly mention the description like what is the target, like what is the end target it has to achieve, right? So they clearly define that. And each time the user sends a message, we automatically attach some information about their current state, such as what files they have open and where their cursor is, and recently viewed files, edit history, so far may or may not be relevant to the coding task. It's up to you to decide. They clearly mention, right? So whenever, let's say I'm using this cursor, my screen is like this. It has to understand, okay, in which file it was there. So previously the user opened any other file or not. So in that way, so it might require this. I mean, it might need this information. For that, they clearly mention may or may not relevant for the coding task. Sometimes we won't ask like solve this method or fulfill this method or complete this method. We won't ask something like that. So sometimes we'll ask in a different way. At the time, it doesn't need any sense to refer the current so file, right? So that's why they given this message. And they clearly declare like your main goal is to follow the user instructions at each message denoted by the user query tag. So whenever we are passing any message, right? So here you can see this. Let's say if I'm doing something, if I given something like this, it will understand it by default. It will attach to the user tag. Then it will understand that it will give some response. That's what they're explaining here. And communication when using Markdown in Assistant messages, use the backticks to format file directory. So they're clearly mentioning like what kind of so format it has to use to send the explanation and all those stuff. Tool calling, this is one of the most interesting things. So see, whenever you are creating any such prompt, right, you have to maintain this kind of a pattern. Like see, they clearly covered the tool calling word, and after that they closed this with this end tags, right? So they clearly maintain the information within this, and also they clearly given the points so that it will understand. So you can see the first they given the role, they set some context, and after that they clearly mention like how it has to communicate. And after that, regarding tools calling, they're mentioning like you have tools, it has many tools, it has to understand which tool it has to use, and they clearly given the instructions. So if you're making a plan, immediately follow it and do not wait for user to confirm or tell you to go ahead, because tool calling, once it understand that it has to do the tool calling, then there is no need to ask the user. So that's what they're saying here. And in that way they set some basic rules. And after that, search and reading. So if you're unsure about answer to the user request or how to satiate the request, you should gather more information. Let's say it doesn't have understand clear understanding, then it has to ask some questions. So in that way they tune the prompt. And after that, making code changes, the user is likely, yeah, obviously the purpose we are using cursor is like, let's say I have some method changes needed in this one. So simply I can say this like modify this method in my for my requirements. I can ask something like this, right? It has to handle all these things. That's what they're mentioning here. The user is likely just asking questions and not looking for edits. Sometimes I'll ask some other query, it need not to be applicable to my existing code. Then how it has to respond, how it has to react. So in that way they given some examples and they given explain something, right? User info, user's OS version, absolute path, where currently the user is working, and all those things. They given some examples, custom instructions, and after the sample, like file content, they given some kind of a few short examples, and after the tools, what is the function they use, and what is the name of it, how it has to give the description, what is the purpose of this, and when using this tool to gather information, it's your responsibility to ensure you have complete context. So they clearly given these kind of instructions. Okay, so this is how they created this chart prompt. Okay, now we'll see agent CLI, command line no interface. Okay, same thing like your AI coding assistant powered by GPT. This one earlier it was like chat prompt is based on GPT-4o, and the CLI was based on GPT-5. So they clearly given like your an interactive CLI tool that help users with software engineering tasks. Here also, if you observe both these things, they clearly mention what is your role and what is your target, what you have to do, what is your goal. So all these things they clearly mentioned. You are an agent. Please keep going until the user query is completely resolved. So cursor, what it will do, it has to repeatedly solve the things for you. So for that, it has to behave like that, right? So for that, you have to given some kind of a system prompt in a proper way with all the instructions. So clearly given the communication, like always ensure only relevant sections like code snippet, tables, command, and structured data in a valid markdown. Okay, avoid wrapping the entire message in a single code block. Instead of doing entire thing on a single block, you have to do it in a proper semantic way. And always use this backtakes and to format file directory. Same thing, same instructions. And after that status update, they clearly given the explanation like what it has to do, like what happened and what you are going to do. So whenever you ask anything, the model will say like cursor will say like next is this, I'll do this, I'll do that, initially I did this. In that way it'll given some kind of explanation. So that is what it was doing, like status update specifications and summary specifications, right? Summarize, like they clearly given any changes, whatever changes it made, it has to do it in a, it has to make those comments to the user like, okay, I did these changes, I implemented these steps in a better summarized way. So that's what they mentioned here. And this is the flow. Whenever a new goal is detected, run a brief discovery pass, read only, so not understand the code and do something. So before logical groups of tool calls, before calling the tools, you have to do some kind of a basic analysis. Then based on that, go for the tools. That's what they clearly given the flow. And tool calling, like use only provided tools. Whatever tools which are there, use those tools only. Don't go for any creative or any so new tools or something. That's what they're saying. Parallelize tool calls. Sometimes you need to do multiple tools at the same time. You have to access, and at the same time you have to use so multiple tools at the time, instead of doing on sequential manner like one tool at a time. So you have to do it in a parallel way. That's what they mention here, right? Tool calling. And after that, context understanding. So group search is your main exploration tool. They already created some tools. One of the tool name is like, sorry, it's not group, it's grep search. And critical, like start with a broad set of queries that capture keywords based on the user request and provided context. So run multiple grep searches in parallel with different patterns and variations. And after that, keep searching new areas until you are confident. We have some relevant code narrow. And so what it was doing is like they already have some kind of a tools. One of the tool is like grep search. It is a main exploration tool. And whenever user ask any query, so it has to understand that from the keywords, and it has to do some analysis, and so that way they mention this kind of a context understanding. And maximize parallel tool calls. You have to clearly you can see like default to parallel. See, time is the most important thing. So let's say you're doing the things in a sequential manner, it will take a lot of time. So your efforts will be bit wasted. So that's why they're saying like you have to call the multiple tools at the same time. Yeah. Then after that, making code changes. This is an extremely important step. So that's why they mentioned it is extremely important. They clearly mentioned because whenever you ask to do some changes to the code, sometimes it won't work. It will create a lot of issues and trust issues to the developer. So once if you break his trust, so it's very difficult. Like for cursor, so developers are the users, right? So once you break the user, like they are customers, like for cursor, customers are developers who are building the code. So if you break their trust, then they won't rely on it, they go for another vendor or other third party tool. So why they have to use, like why they have to use cursor, they have many other options, right? So that's why they're clearly mentioning all these things whenever you're doing some code changes, because you can't go back, right? Unless and until you push to Git or GitHub. So you maintain some kind of a repo and all those things, history. So then you will get the clarity. Like okay, even though the code changes now, I can pull back. But if you're not doing that, let's the code is modified, then you'll be clueless. So that's why this is one of the most important steps. Like whenever you're doing some kind of a code changes, I mean, you and that is not you doing. So cursor will do the things, but we're understanding. So how well they implemented this kind of a prompt. Okay. So if you're creating the code base from scratch and they clearly mention sometimes it won't give this requirement.txt and also readme. So, but they clearly mention this is a mandatory you have to create. And if you're building a web app from scratch, give it a beautiful and modern UI and best UX practices. Clearly mentioning like, okay, how to follow UI and UX practices to make the application. Let's say I can go to cursor and I can say I want to build one application, web application. Do this thing for me, do that thing for me, but it will do the things because we given the instructions like this. Okay. So never generate an extremely long hash or any non-textual code such as binary. See, obviously it has to do the things in Python. So that's why they mention like, of course, you can get it in other programming languages also. By default, it will be this requirement.txt and all those things related to Python. So that's why. Okay, code style is an important thing. The code they clearly mention like will be reviewed by humans, optimized for clarity and readability, high verbosity code. So because human has to read it, he has to understand, he has to debug that. So that's why they clearly mention like naming convention, how it has to queue. So static type languages, AP, how we have to deal with APIs and how it has to maintain with comments, formatting, citing code, click on the code base in the editor, which allows you to take time to, okay. They're mentioning like, let's say you've given some information and how the user going to take it. And, so all these things they mentioned in the prompt and markdown specification, how it has to give and all those things. They given some kind of a notes like how they have to mention the files and all those things, right? And you can see the date, like when they created this, all this stuff. Hmm. Interesting, right? So this is how they implemented the logics. You can see this. This is almost long prompt. I think total number of lines are 772. Oh my God. So this many lines we are passing. Like this is this much data which is there in the backend. Right, so whenever you ask any query, so these many things will work in these kind of a prompts which are there in the backend. So that's why you're getting good accurate response. Otherwise, you won't get. I think this file is regarding tools like what kind of functions it has, what is the purpose of each file, what it has to do, and also they clearly given some kind of examples like few shot prompting. You can see this. Okay, so target directories, how it has to focus on the directories, and what is the strategy, how it has to understand. So it has to give some explanation, queries, semantic search, and after relevant context in one go. Begin with this, and we have to maintain that. In that way, they clearly given, and they clearly given the examples and uses also. So I think you can go ahead and read this thing. So majorly, what I want to cover here is like I just want to show you like what kind of a prompts they used. For implementing cursor, how well they clearly given, like how it has to, the code style has to be in which format, and how well you can execute. You can see they clearly given the best example also, right? So it has to give the code in this way, not using quotations, Python. Is not this by default. So model will return the response in this way. So quotations like quotations, Python, then or JSON, then it will review the code. But it shouldn't be the case, right? So it has to directly give the code in this manner with proper semantics, spaces, right? So that's what they mention, like how it has to give the rules and what task it has to do. So they created multiple versions, but it's for our understanding. Okay, so how they implemented it. I hope you got some clarity. So cursor, behind cursor, what kind of a prompts they used and how long these prompts are, at the same time, how logical these prompts are, what kind of a words and vocabulary they used. You can see this, like this one is like they clearly mention what kind of a model they have to use and what kind of instruction they have to use, how it has to deal with the tool falling, all those things they mentioned, right? So I hope you got some clarity regarding the cursor. So whenever you did anything, so in the back end, these many things are happening and these many logics are happening in the prompts, right? Okay. I hope you got something and we'll see you in the next tutorials. Till then, take care. Bye bye.